One final push for the summit. Hi there, Coach Sage of VO2 Max Productions and SageRunning.com here with another training talk. Today we're going to talk about when you might want to switch to power hiking versus running during a trail race. Now there's a lot of factors that go into this. I'm actually up here at altitude here near Devil's Thumb. It's a Continental Divide. Up, gonna go up to 12,000 feet, about 4,000 meters in altitude. So it's harder to breathe. So that's one factor, altitude. The other is the steepness of the hill, the percent grade. For me, I love runnable uphills. It's my specialty. About 15% grade is pretty steep. It's what most treadmills max out at. 5% grade are what most highways and roads in the US, mainstream roads for trucks, top out at. 10% grade is also pretty steep. What percent grade you start power hiking at will also depend on the distance of the race, your relative fitness level, the distance duration of the race, if I didn't mention that, as well as your strengths and weaknesses as a runner. Maybe you're better at downhills relative to your uphill performance. But yeah, it depends on a lot of factors. Basically, if you're doing a long ultra, I should say any ultra, 50K and above, but especially if you're doing like a 100-mile, 160K ultra, you're probably going to want to power hike a lot of the uphills, like a lot, especially early on. Western states, for example, the escarpment, most people, almost everyone will hike that entire climb because the first couple miles, first couple kilometers of a 100-mile race. Devil's Thumb climb, Western states, is also over 12-15% grades, and it's really hot, so most people will power hike that entire section. But it's a matter of pacing yourself. If you weren't doing a 100-mile ultra and you were just doing a 30K training run or 19-mile training run, you know, maybe it would be a runnable uphill. But because you're pacing yourself and you want to save your legs and not be going past your threshold or burning through your glycogen supplies too fast or getting out of fat burning zone, you want to power hike. So the number one factor, number one thing is listening to your breathing and heart rate too. Relative heart rate's straps of error. This for strep is horrible, for example. But breathing, you know, you want to be able to carry on a conversation still, be in the conversational, easy pace zone. So once you start gasping for breath, and I'm about to hit really steep climb here at altitude, so I'm gonna start power hiking. Once you start breathing, and it's hard to talk, it's getting a little hard for me to talk right now. You know, if this is a 100-mile race, I don't want to be breathing this hard early on in the race. Maybe if it's, you know, the last climb in the last hour, I could be giving it everything I got to finish strong. But early on, you don't want to cross that aerobic threshold, and you certainly don't want to be even close to your lactate threshold, which is when you're developing lactate, unless it's like a 10K cross country race or you know, the last climb of a shorter race, half marathon trail race, something like that. So listen to your breathing. It's the number one thing. You know, even if you're a great uphill runner, for me, if it's over 20% grade, unless it's a vertical K all-out race, I'm usually power hiking some steps. The other factor is technicality of the trail, right? If it's smooth and it's a road or it's a paved road, it's easier to get that running motion in and maybe more efficient. If it's rocky and there's a bunch of step-ups, you pretty much have to power hike because you don't want to have to jump up stairs, basically, in the power hike. It's less efficient. So that's another factor, is the terrain. If it's icy and snowy, you're probably going to have to power hike. Maybe you're using poles as well, and maybe you're more efficient with poles power hiking. The other thing is power hiking technique, which we talked about in other videos. You can check out them in on our playlist. But yeah, all these factors, as well as your relative fitness, is probably the bigger one. If you're trained for uphills, you've done some high power hill running sessions. High power, I mean doing actual hill repeats, like 1 minute, 2 minute, 3 minute hill repeats at high intensity, as well as all uphill tempo runs, 20 minutes at 85%, reps like that. Long runs where you mimic the terrain and mountainous environment, especially if you're training for a mountain race. You have to generally power hike a lot more for those. Then you kind of get a feel. Your threshold might change. You might be, when you're in peak shape, you might be able to run some uphills that you weren't able to run before. Likewise, the final note, when you're bonking, when you're running low on fuel, or you're really hot or dehydrated late in a race, you're probably not going to be able to run a lot of uphills. You don't have the muscular force, maybe you're cramping, you're sheer muscle failure. So that's another thing. When you realize if you're trying to do a running motion and people are passing you and they're power hiking, that means you're probably getting close to the switch off where you might want to consider power hiking. But I've been in races, I'm not very good at power hiking relative to my uphill running, and I'll keep a running motion because it feels more comfortable for me, and guys will be right next to me or passing me doing a power hiking motion. So it's something to get used to, something you have to practice. Usually on steep grades it's definitely going to be more efficient, but it depends on the duration of the race and your relative fitness level. Like I said, how long you have to go in the race also matters. Intensity, right? In shorter races, half marathon and below, 2 hours or less, even 3 hours or less, bonking and glycogen depletion, you could still bonk, but you don't have to be taking in as many gels or worrying about massive dehydration. You could burn the glycogen stores a lot hotter, which means you're breathing harder on the uphills early on. Whereas if it's a longer ultramarathon race, you're just trying to survive, you're more in a fat burning zone, 60, 65, 70% max heart rate. You probably don't want to spike the heart rate up over 75% maximum or 80%, or be breathing so hard you can't at least talk like I am talking right now, because that means you're probably pushing too hard. And if your legs don't fail you later on, you'll bonk later on probably. Have to be taking in a lot of sugar. You'll be burning it hot. You might get stomach distress because of the altitude, stomach distress from lack of blood flow to the GI tract, because when you're working harder, blood flow goes to the muscles. So those are the key takeaways. Again, thanks so much for subscribing on here. Be sure to check out our Sandy and I did a video on uphill and downhill running form. I'll link to it there. So let's check out our playlist. More videos like this, power hiking form, technical downhill running, trail running, you name it. Subscribe for more videos. Thanks so much to the Patreon supporters. Thanks to title sponsor Hoka One One. We say One One now. And definitely stay tuned for more of VO2 Max Productions. Woo!